welcome back to Subconscious Medicine. I'm your host, Ella, and thanks so much for joining today. So, coming at you after an extremely long travel day. If you didn't know, my best friend goes to Tulane University in New Orleans, and I spent the weekend there visiting her. So that was an amazing trip. I've been there once before also to visit her. And we kind of did all the quintessential New Orleans things. But I went back for the weekend just to hang out with her, so it was really, really fun. However, on my flight back from New Orleans, back to Tampa, my flight was delayed like 3 or 4 times, and then it was canceled, and the next soonest flight was a full 26 hours later, but I had nowhere to go, so I spent those 26 hours in the airport, and highly don't recommend. It was not fun, but we're here. It could have been worse. Definitely lacking some sleep, but it's okay. We made it through, and still a great trip. Don't regret at all. A little bit of unfortunate circumstances, but that's okay. But anyways, I'm back. I actually leave tomorrow. Again. I'm going to surprise my grandma for her birthday, so I'm actually so excited. So I'm flying into Rhode Island tomorrow night. Should be so much fun. Can't wait to see her. I'm gonna be able to see my parents too, which is really exciting. So, yeah, it's been a lot of travel recently, but wouldn't have it any other way. So grateful to be able to visit people that I love. So, yeah. But anyways, I wanted to touch on that because that's why this upload schedule has been a little bit all over the place. Really hoping to get back into a routine and regular scheduled programming, because I love being on a very regimented schedule. It's just been a little bit hectic over here. Not an excuse, just saying. And yeah, I hope to be, I don't even want to say more consistent because I am uploading. It's just not like the same day every week, but hoping to work all of that out in the coming weeks. And I'm also planning on bulk recording a few episodes to help me out with that a little bit. So we're gonna see how that works. I'm not sure how I feel about that yet, but we're gonna try, and maybe it'll be great. I don't know. But anyways, that's where I've been. Hope you guys are great. Hope you're enjoying your summer. It's been so hot in Tampa. But it's also been raining a lot, which I guess is like typical summer weather. It actually kind of looks like it's about to rain, so if you hear some thunder, rain, please just ignore that. But yeah, summer's going by so fast. It actually kind of makes me want to puke, but it's okay. It's been going great, having so much fun, so many great opportunities that, again, I'm just really grateful to have. So yeah, looking forward to senior year too, which is also crazy. But speaking of that, looking into senior year and like post-grad life, I've been thinking a lot about my goals in life, not just professionally, but kind of in all aspects of life. And it has me thinking a lot about how my goals and my biggest fears are intertwined in so many ways, and that's kind of an interesting paradox that I feel like I never really recognized before. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me, why, the things that you aspire to have are also, like inversely related to what your fears are rooted in, because most of my fears are related to failing at those big long-term goals. So I guess maybe it's a more obvious relationship than I had ever given credit, but I guess it's just not really something I put much thought towards prior to now. But I think it's really interesting, and I love to hear about people's goals. I find it to be really inspiring and motivating and insightful, and I feel like it tells you a lot about a person, um, just as much as someone's fears. So, yeah, I wanted to touch a little bit on my biggest fears and my biggest goals, and sort of how the two are connected. Okay, so I feel like we should start out on a high note. And I'm thinking we'll just alternate from from goal to fear and back and forth. I think that might sort of help the storyline a little bit. So, again, some of these are really obviously related, others not so much, but I'm hoping to touch on the relationship that I see exists, at least. And hopefully, like I said, it's insightful for you guys, or at least encourages you to sort of engage in the same thought process. Okay, so my first goal, one that I feel like is I don't want to say universal, but I think a lot of people aspire to work towards this, and that is travel the world. Sort of fitting for my last few weeks that have comprised a lot of travel. I love traveling. I love experiencing new cultures, experiencing new people, and traditions and food. And I think it's an incredibly valuable gift to be able to experience new cultures, specifically ones that are in large part different from the one you grew up in, or your own, the own culture that you adopt. And this is something that I don't feel like I got to tap into much in my young childhood. We weren't a family that traveled very much, and when we did, it was to communities that were either full of tourists or full of people pretty similar to our own family. We traveled a lot to Rhode Island, and the community, although being on a beach, which is sort of the appeal, in large part was very similar to the community that we were raised in. And culturally, no like stark differences. We also traveled to the Cape when I was really little. Honestly, don't really remember much of that, but again, the Cape pretty similar to the types of communities that we would find ourselves in Rhode Island. And then moving into like adolescent years, I did travel a bit more, but it was in large part for softball. And so in those types of situations, the goal was definitely not to experience new cultures or new food or sort of sightsee. That was never really the goal. The goal was to compete. I was there for my sport, and as much as I'm grateful for that and appreciate those experiences, I certainly wouldn't refer to it as like leisure travel. And so it wasn't really until maybe like later high school that I really got to travel on my own. Junior year of high school. No, junior year. Wow, was it really senior year? I guess it was senior year, yeah. Fall of my senior year was October. I went on my first solo trip, and honestly, my first real trip in general. Actually, let me backtrack. I did go on a trip in like 7th or 8th grade to the Dominican Republic. That was my first time out of the country, got my passport. That was amazing. We went for my grandparents' 50th anniversary. They brought the whole family. It was an amazing experience. Had a wonderful time. It was such a gorgeous country. However, like when most people travel to, anywhere in Central or South America, we stayed on a resort. We stayed at the Hard Rock in Punta Cana, and it was, like I said, gorgeous. It was so relaxing. There were excursions every day. It was an amazing trip, absolutely incredible, but not a cultural experience. We weren't going to meet locals or to, experience Dominican traditions. We were going for leisure, and I think that's okay. But I don't think it was a very insightful trip. I think it was a relaxing one. certainly, in sort of a family bonding experience that I'm grateful for, but I don't necessarily think it was conducive to sort of my worldview. So anyways, fast forward again to fall of my senior year of high school. I went on my first solo trip. I was visiting my boyfriend who goes to school, or went to school rather, in Kansas, but I didn't want to go to Kansas. So instead we met up. We went to Denver, Colorado, and this was an absolutely amazing trip. I definitely was a bit nervous about traveling on my own for the first time, but it went so smoothly, really easy. I feel like I navigated the airport well. I guess it helped that I wasn't like checking luggage, so that usually makes the process a little bit simpler. But yeah, it was an amazing trip. I love the city of Denver. I would absolutely positively love to go back. In fact, I'd also love to go back to Colorado, but experience outside of Denver, because I really, really want to do like hikes. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful state. There's so much gorgeous scenery. We could actually see the mountain range from downtown Denver, which is amazing. It's such a modern city. It's quite clean. It was just an amazing experience, and we honestly didn't really go into it with much of a plan, and we kind of just rolled with the punches and took it day by day. The weather was gorgeous. I know Denver can get quite cold, but we kind of went in the perfect time. It was the very first week of August, and the weather was just gorgeous, and we had a great time. And so it was really my first experience. And then the summer after my senior year of high school, I went on a trip to California. I went with my mom and my boyfriend. My mom has some family out in California, right outside of LA. They live in Laguna Hills, and so we visited them for half the trip, and then we also spent the other half in like the heart of LA, like downtown LA. And again, an amazing trip. To be quite frank, I don't feel like I need to go back to LA. I know a lot of people love it there. It's a gorgeous city, but I kind of feel like I've seen it. I don't really feel like there's much else I need to do there. I encourage other people to go experience it for themselves, definitely, but I don't really get the hype. I appreciate cities on the East Coast so much more, to be honest. I appreciate Denver so much more. I just feel like it has more to offer. LA is a lot of shopping. There's not a very strong cultural feel there, although I know it's very diverse city. I don't feel like there's a cultural influence there in the same way that there is in New Orleans or in Tampa. And it's just not New York, to me, at least, as someone who kind of grew up going to New York. So I appreciate my trip there, but I don't know that I would go back. However, would 1,000% go back to Laguna Hills. I encourage anyone who's traveling to like the LA area or California in general, if you have time to spend, spare time to spend somewhere, I urge everyone to go to Laguna Hills. It truly looks like a scene out of a movie. It is absolutely stunning. It was the most relaxing few days of my life. It's gorgeous. There's so much to do. There's some amazing restaurants. I have a million pictures from our few days there, and I wish I could go back like tomorrow. It's stunning, and I had such a wonderful time, and I would love to be able to spend some more time there. I really encourage people to go check it out. I feel like it's really underhyped, whereas I feel like everyone wants to go to LA kind of. And again, definitely go, take the trip, but if you have time in your schedule, really encourage you to check out Laguna Hills. It's stunning. So then after that, completed my first year of college, and then the summer between freshman and sophomore year of college, I traveled to Paris. I went with my mom, my boyfriend, and my boyfriend's mom, and amazing experience. We went for an air show. My my boyfriend is a pilot, and so there was an air show in Paris, and he kind of loves that stuff, and so we just kind of made a trip out of it. We were there for maybe 2 weeks, maybe a few days less, 10 days, 11 days, something like that. But we really made a trip out of it. We took a day trip to Milan, in Italy, and just an amazing experience. I loved getting to experience a new culture and really experience it. Again, not being on a resort, but really getting to appreciate France and the small part of Italy that we did get to see. Architecture, gorgeous, like completely breathtaking, so much historical influence. The food in France wasn't really my thing, but the one day we spent in Italy, I've never eaten so good. It was absolutely amazing. The fashion in Europe, I mean, people talk about that all the time, but it's really incredible. You can't walk the streets of Europe and see leggings or like athleisure clothes of any sort, to be honest. They simply don't wear it, and it's really mind-boggling because that's something you see all the time in the US and don't really think twice about, but they dress so nice there. Also do your shopping in Europe much cheaper, so that's always a plus. But yeah, it was just an incredible experience, and again, for the first time I felt like I got to experience a new culture, and I'm really grateful for that. And even though the food wasn't really my thing, I enjoyed getting to taste some of it. And also the pastries are great. I'm not a huge sweet person, but the few that I did try were excellent, and I went with my mom again, who has a huge sweet tooth, and she really loved them. So definitely worth the trip. Had an amazing time. Would love to go back to Europe, especially Italy. My family's Italian, so I've always had that strong urge to go and explore a bit. But yeah, amazing trip. And then this year has brought a lot of travel. This past year, obviously, I packed my bags and moved to Tampa. So that means I'm traveling pretty frequently from Connecticut to the US. I mean, oh my goodness, Connecticut to the US. I mean, Connecticut to Tampa, rather. And, I make that trip a lot. And I feel like I've really gotten to experience Tampa. I do consider this home now. It's an amazing city. I really can't compare it to any other city. The city I do hear people make comparisons with is San Diego in California. I've never been there, so I can't vouch for that myself. But listening to people's comparison, I can definitely understand the parallel. But how would I describe Tampa? I mean, it's a big city, not like New York at all. It doesn't feel crowded like that. It's much more spread out. Definitely not a walkable city, I wouldn't say. But a city nonetheless, a big city. It has its nice areas. It has its not so nice areas. Definitely very compartmentalized though. There's tons of different communities and neighborhoods. Strong historical influence and cultural influences, particularly in the Ybor area. Really heavy Cuban and Hispanic influences. And then outside of that, it's sort of a melting pot of people, right? Florida in general seems to be a common retirement area or like empty nester area. And so it's, full of people from all over the place, which I really love and appreciate. But on top of that, we're also a beach community. Tampa itself doesn't have true beaches. We definitely have them. They're not what you think of when you think of Florida beaches though, but we're sort of nestled right next to Clearwater and St. Pete, and all these other true beach communities. And so there definitely is that traditional Florida beach community feel, which I really love. In that way, it does kind of remind me of like a Newport, Rhode Island, if you're familiar, or Providence, right? You're on the water, but you're in the heart of a city. But it's just a really unique city, and I really encourage people to check it out. Yes, so traveling from Connecticut to Tampa pretty frequently. Also this year is when I made my first trip and the one I just took, both to New Orleans. Love that city. It's gorgeous. It again has tons of French influence in their food, in their architecture, especially. But a beautiful city. I could never live there, that's for sure. It's definitely a lot going on. It's very busy. But it's a gorgeous city and extremely diverse place, and I love visiting. That's for sure. And I can't wait to go back. Definitely a city I can see myself visiting all throughout my life. I think it's gorgeous. So yeah, that's a little travel recap, I guess. But all this to say, my goal is truly to travel the world and experience different cultures and people and food. And I just think that's such a luxury. And I really value people's opinions who do have those opportunities, because I just think it ignites a sense of wisdom, an intellect that I really, really value. My dream vacation is probably Thailand. I love Thai food, and on top of that, I've just heard that Thai people are just, a really unique community, very close knit, very much community and family oriented, which I think is a really beautiful thing. And so, yeah, I really love to visit, but I'd also really, really want to go back to Europe. There's so much more to see, and I loved what I did see, and so I really want to explore a bit more. Also, side note, I'm realizing it's getting very dark. It's 1000% gonna downpour, so we're just gonna ignore that. Maybe you'll brighten this up a little bit and move on. Okay, so that's my first goal. Next, let's transition to a fear. Okay. One big fear I have for my future is related to my parents. I know I've talked a lot about how I'm really practicing being gracious with my parents, being more intentional in the way I communicate with them, building our relationship, and just learning to love and appreciate them more, especially as I near sort of this phase of young adulthood. But something that I'm really terrified of is disappointing them, in really any way. I look up to them so much, and I know that they support me in anything that I do. They've shown that time and time again, and I'm really grateful to be able to say that, because I know that's not something that everyone can say. But with that becomes a lot of pressure, and this is not to blame them at all. It's entirely an internal pressure, but it's a pressure that I experience to sort of prove myself to them, and just prove to them that I'm capable, that I'm independent, that I can sort of navigate life on my own. And that's a really intense pressure to experience, and one that I'm sure I'm not alone in. But with that comes a fear, a true fear of disappointing them. And to be quite frank, I don't feel like I've ever really disappointed my parents, right? I've made choices, I'm sure, or said things that they don't necessarily agree with. And that's just how the cookie crumbles at times. But I don't really think they've ever shown a sense of disappointment in who I am or what I stand for. And I think that they support me so much that might not even be possible. But I feel a pressure, or rather I place a pressure on myself to make sure they sort of approve of who I am. And I'm just extremely fearful of disappointing them. With that too, I'm also even more fearful of losing my parents. I am lucky in that, knock on wood, my parents seem to be pretty healthy people. And I've lived 20 years with them, and that's something I'm incredibly grateful for. But it also means that I really don't know life without them. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know I just can't imagine a world that doesn't have them in it. And so I'm fearful of that. I recognize that death is sort of a part of life, but it's not something that I've accepted when it comes to close family members. And as they sort of get older, they've entered a new era of being grandparents, and seeing them adopt that role has been a beautiful thing, but it certainly makes that fear of loss even more prominent. So that fear has just encouraged me to be more gracious with them and to appreciate their time and their energy and their love more than I ever have before. And rather than fixating on not disappointing them, focusing in on how I can prove to them my growth, and my value. So yeah, that was kind of hard hitting after talking about traveling, I guess. But I love my parents, and I'm definitely fearful of disappointment from them or losing them. But again, I know it's part of life, and I just work hard to enjoy the time that they do get to spend on this earth. Yeah. Okay. Let's transition back to a goal. Okay, so obviously I love my parents and really value family, and I love my own family and appreciate the experiences and relationships I have with them. And because of that, I have a extremely strong passion to have a family of my own one day. This has always been a very prominent goal of mine. I'm enticed by the opportunity to be able to love and support someone throughout their childhood and into their adolescence and adulthood, and that really inspires me to be a good mom one day. I really look forward to that. I also have recently witnessed my sister sort of enter this new stage of motherhood, and she's done so in such a beautiful and seamless way. I say seamless hesitantly. I know if you were to ask her, I'm sure she would, admit the challenges that are, of course, to be expected with becoming a mother. But that being said, as an outsider looking in, she has adopted this new role in a really, really beautiful way, and she's thriving as a mother. My nephew and hers bond is a beautiful thing to witness, and I'm so grateful to be able to be there and play a role in that. Definitely has sort of solidified my opinions on my own motherhood one day, and that's still something I definitely see myself wanting. That being said, I have always had a sort of inclination that I would adopt kids. And this is something that I feel like people don't always understand when I talk about. It has nothing to do with me not wanting to have biological children. Rather, sort of my perspective on this, I guess, is there are so many children that are brought into this world that, for a long list of extenuating circumstances, are not predisposed to quality caregivers who can support and love them to the extent that they need. And because of that, I would like to think that the people that are on this earth that do have those means, that want to have children, might want to consider maybe offering a new opportunity to those kids that are already out there. So again, not to say that I would never have kids of my own. In fact, I probably see myself doing both. Maybe adopting one child or whatever, and having a child of my own if that's something that's even feasible for me. But I do definitely see myself pursuing that route. It comes with a lot of risk. It's extremely expensive. It's a long process. There's lots of reasons to maybe avoid that route for lots of different families, but it's something I really have always seen myself doing. And so I'm intrigued to at least entertain the idea and engage in the process. And maybe it doesn't work out for me, in which case, it probably wasn't meant for me, but it's definitely something I want to consider. I want to keep my options open. I love the possibilities that exist via adoption, and I would love to be a part of that. But nonetheless, I'd love to have a family of my own. I kind of see it as like a never-ending job, and something about that is really enticing to me. There's no end goal. You're not ever perfect at it. It's challenging. It's demanding. It requires constant attention, and I just find the idea of motherhood to be really, really beautiful, or parenthood in general, rather, to be very beautiful. And I've always sort of pictured myself having a family, owning a home, and also being able to carry on traditions from my own childhood with a new generation, and also making changes. So accepting the things that I appreciated in my childhood and allowing my children in the future to experience those same things, and also letting go of things that I don't feel like served me from my parents for, whatever reason, and adopting new traditions and customs and values and being able to enforce those under my own roof. That's something that I really value. I think my parents did that very well. They definitely, held on to some traditional values that were instilled in them from my grandparents, but they also adopted some new things. And that sort of intergenerational component of parenthood I find to be really interesting, and a path that I myself want to walk down one day. So I appreciate my experiences within my family, and the bonds and relationships that I've built, and I really hope I can offer that to some kiddos in the future, and do that with someone by my side, a spouse by my side. That's something I've always sort of dreamt about, and foresee myself pursuing as sort of a long-term goal. So with that, again, goes hand in hand of my fear not being able to have a family, or not being able to support the family that I do have. And this is something that really gets to me sometimes, only because I really do see myself as a mother figure later in life. And so the idea of not having that opportunity is really stressful. As harsh as it may sound, I sort of feel like I wouldn't be fulfilling, all of my purpose and exercising all of my strengths if I didn't, welcome that motherhood era into my life. And sometimes I question why I feel such a strong urge to be a mother. Maybe it's like my innate maternal instincts as a female to sort of have that view. But again, I know a lot of people in my life who don't see themselves becoming parents, don't see themselves having kids in the future. And that's an amazing thing too. Obviously, no pressure to accept that role. That's not something that we're here to do. But for some reason, I sort of have always seen myself in that role. I don't know if it's because I love working with children so much, or what it is, to be honest, but the fear of not having that opportunity is definitely something that has always scared me. And especially having children and not being able to support them. Again, my parents have done an amazing job to support me all my life. Again, times were easier than others, but they've always supported me in any way that they could to the best of their abilities. And not being able to give that to my future children is definitely something that I'm worried about. I know children obviously come with an intense financial and burden and time commitment and emotional commitment. So it's certainly a hard task, one that I can't quite understand yet, not having been a parent to this point. But I do fear not being able to support them. And something I just try to encourage myself to remember is, in terms of not being able to have a family, there's so many options. Again, we talked about adoption. There's fostering. There's a plethora of options out there. And in terms of supporting my children, I know, as stupid as it sounds, I know I'd figure it out. Plenty of parents do, and I have a great network of people, family, friends, etc., people who will be close to me then, who I probably haven't even met yet in my current life, but I'll have a great network of people to support me in that time and support me in that new stage of life when it's time, and I know it'll work out. So yeah, but that's a great example, I feel like, of how our goals and our fears can sort of be intertwined, particularly when our goal is something of some sort of physicality. Not to say that children are just material in any way, but like children are physical in essence, right? They're a thing that you sort of obtain isn't the right word, I suppose, but you have children, right? So certainly if that was a goal, then a fear would be to not have that. So that's what I mean when I feel like goals and fears are oftentimes really interconnected, which is a sort of interesting dichotomy that I guess I never really considered before. But okay. Something else that I have sort of established as a goal, and this one's a little bit more short term. Not that I'm not giving myself time to grow in this, but it's also something that I'm actively working on. So different than having a family or even traveling the world, really, I'm really actively working on healing my relationship with money. This is something that I've talked about previously, but I'm an extremely anxious spender. I experience intense discomfort and anxiety when I have to spend money, even when it's on a necessity. It's way beyond the point of frugality at this point, and it's general anxiety about money and about spending and about finances, and I'm not really sure what the root is, or what the cause is per se, but it's something that I've had to face a lot in young adulthood, particularly moving to a new state and having to support myself in college. But healing my relationship with money is something that I'm actively working on. It's going okay, but I also recognize it's going to be a long process. And so this is a goal that I have for myself, not really with an end date in mind necessarily, but rather progress in mind. I want to become more secure in my finances and in my spending habits and in my savings. And I don't want to feel limited by them. I don't want to pass up on opportunities rooted in my financial fear and anxiety. I want to welcome experiences and opportunities, and anything that's passed my way. Being smart and intentional about my spending, but not avoiding experiences, to limit myself. And I feel like this pairs hand in hand with traveling the world, right? So, obviously these are amazing experiences, but they're priceless experiences. They come with a hefty price tag, but they're irreplaceable. They're extraordinary experiences, and although I want to be smart and cautious and intentional about the way I spend money, even when it's related to travel, I never want to pass up on opportunities to travel the world, to experience new cultures and new people and new traditions, because I'm fearful of spending money, because I'm limiting myself. And I think that's a hard line to walk on, is finding balance there, and spending money intentionally to gather those experiences, but also being smart and being realistic about what you can and can't afford. my grandmother and grandfather, when he was alive, sort of lived by this theory that if you couldn't pay for it in full, you couldn't afford it. So, and they kind of had that perspective about a lot of things. For instance, if they couldn't pay for a car in full on the day that they wanted to purchase the car, in their eyes, it wasn't affordable. Whereas most people would finance a car, they would work their way towards it, they would eventually pay it off. My grandparents don't see things like that. And I'm not saying I'm quite as extreme as my grandparents, but, I have a lot of that financial insecurity rooted in me, and I really want to work on actively trying to heal that. So I've adopted some new sort of systems to get me there. Certainly having an unpaid internship right now is not conducive to this goal at all, but it's something I'm really, really working on, and I do hope that I can sort of reach a place of comfort when it comes to financial security. I also think being financially literate is really important in that. Something I'm also trying to work on is just sort of expanding my knowledge on what it means to be financially secure, and adopting new and smart practices of how to save money and how to invest money and things of that sort. So again, this is something I'm actively working on. Not to say it's a short-term goal, definitely something I always want to work on, but it's something that I'm accepting as a challenge right now. In current life, and I really want to be intentional about working towards. Okay, my last fear, definitely not the last thing I'm afraid of, actually, let's back that up. The last one I wanted to chat about it's a big one, and that is not fitting in to the right career. And this is something that I want to say is pretty universal to college students. I really don't think I'm unique in this. I think that a lot of people share a similar perspective. This is something I've talked about a lot with people my age, and most people seem to at least understand where I'm coming from. But as a little bit of a backstory, I do think my sort of perspective on the working world, on my future career, is a little bit unique. And the reason I say that is because from my experiences talking with people both my age and older than me who've already entered the workforce, there seems to be a running trend about drive and motive. And what I mean by that is it seems as though people tend to enter a career based off of a positive example set for them in that career. For instance, I know a lot of people who want to be teachers because they had a great teacher when they were little and they want to serve that same role for future students. I know a lot of people who want to be businessmen because their fathers or their mothers are in business and they're successful and they do a great job and they want to follow in their footsteps. The examples go on, and that these are wonderful things. To have a positive role model in a professional setting is an incredible experience, and I value that, and I think that's beautiful, and I think that's amazing, so long as it's aligned with your own goals and your own values and strengths. So I think that's wonderful. My experience is very different, though. I am drawn to a career that I have had firsthand experience with. I have interacted with, in childhood and in adolescence, but in a very, very negative light. I've seen people in these types of roles, and I say this, with full disclosure, not knowing what my end career goal is. I don't have a specific title that I'm working towards necessarily, but I've identified a population I want to work with and identified a sort of sector that I want to work with them in. But I can't really tell you what my end goal is. I'm interested in the foster care system. I'm interested in the legal side of policy and advocacy when it comes to the system of care and, the family dynamic, and child development and all of these things, right, that are sort of interconnected and related in many ways, but there's not really a clear career option for someone who has these interests. And so, as I was saying, I have sort of had the opposite experiences of what I feel like most kids my age are doing. Most kids are identifying that positive influence and influence and following in their steps, I'm identifying a negative influence. I'm saying, I had contact with the system, I had contact with people of all different professions and titles in this sort of network of careers, and I don't feel like they did their job well. I feel like they failed me. I feel like they failed other people, other children, specifically other families, and I don't want to put future children in that position. And I struggle at communicating this to people because I never want it to come off in a way that insinuates I feel like I could do a better job than them. But instead, what I want to express is I've been in that position and I know what doesn't work. And I feel like I may be more attentive to feedback about what does work. That feedback coming from children, or that feedback coming from parents, or caregivers of any sort, really. So, in that way, I feel like I have a unique perspective. That being said, I have an intense fear about not finding my place. As I mentioned, I don't have a specific career title in mind as an end goal. And that welcomes a lot of anxiety for me. You don't feel like that's the case for any people. Many people seem to be able to sort of identify that career. I'm thinking specifically, I'm a psych major, right? And most students I encounter, friends, classmates, etc., say, oh, I want to be a therapist. And they'll say, I don't know if I want to work with families or children or couples or in a school or whatever, but I know I want to do therapy. I'm the opposite. I know exactly the population I want to work with. In fact, it's quite specific, honestly, hyper specific, to the point where it is, a tad bit limiting in a way that I'm accepting of. So I know the population, but I don't know how I want to get there. I don't know how I want to get, establish and maintain contact with those people. I don't want to do therapy. Something about sitting on a couch and talking, engaging in traditional talk therapy with a client, and setting an hour-long timer, and something about that to me just isn't appealing. I think it's wonderful for the right person, and I think people do it extremely well. And I look at my classmates or my friends and I talk to them, and I think to myself, wow, they would be excellent at this. I don't feel the same about myself. I don't feel like I do well with micro level work. I really see myself working in a macro level position, engaging in true policy reform, and that's where my interest lies. I'm not interested in working one-on-one. Again, I just don't think I'm the right person for that. I think I look to my classmates and to my friends and I think, wow, they are such a great fit for those positions, and that is not me. And so, again, all this to say is this introduces a lot of anxiety and fear for me about where my sort of correct fit is going to be in terms of the professional world. And as much as this is a fear, it's also really exciting to me. I like the idea that I haven't pigeonholed myself into any specific career field, or rather, I guess I have career field, but not position, not title per se. I'm sort of open to a lot of different things. I've considered law. I've considered becoming a police officer. I really want to be a corrections officer at some point in my life, or a parole officer. I'm interested in possibly doing therapy, but not in a one-on-one way, in a more interactive group setting, potentially like going into prisons and offering therapeutic services, things of that sort. I'm really enticed to work with nonprofits and in group home settings at a company like or an agency rather, like DCF, or I'm really open to a lot of these experiences, and I'm excited to see where that takes me. So as much as this is a fear, it's a good one. I really feel like it's motivating me to encourage different career paths and just really explore my options. And it's something I'm kind of learning to love about myself. So as much as it's a fear, I'm learning to appreciate it a bit. Okay. So, with that, I want to discuss my last goal. Again, obviously, I have more fears and goals than what's on this list. These are just a few things that I really want to touch on. Again, sorry if you hear the thunder. It's intense. It's just part of living in Florida, I guess. Also, the lightning is uber distracting. I can see it in the corner of my eye. But anyways, okay, the last goal I want to touch on is, wow, I can think of so many more right now. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2. But anyways, the last goal I want to touch on is sort of a reflection of my confidence journey, and in building an identity that I feel confident in. And this goal is a desire to question my own beliefs to become more secure and confident in my identity. And as I touched on before, this is a goal that I truly see as a lifelong one. I don't see an end in sight ever for this. I want to be constantly questioning who I am, what I believe, what I value, who I let into my life. I really see an intense value in engaging in active criticism, of your own beliefs, being, sort of scrutinizing what it is that you believe and value, not to change or diminish your beliefs, but instead to build confidence in them, right? So instead of just accepting things because they're easy or because they're at your fingertips, but rather accepting them because you have a valid reason to do so, or adopting new traditions because you have a valid reason to do so, or accepting a new part of your identity because you have a valid reason to do so. And that sort of questioning and critical thinking is something I hope to engage in all my life. For a long time, I feel like we neglect that part, right? Early childhood is all about, accepting things that are sort of accessible. So maybe you adopt certain beliefs because your parents think that way, or maybe you stay close to certain friends because you've been friends with them for years, because your parents are friends, whatever it is, playing a sport because your siblings play a sport, right? That process is not individualistic. It's in large part driven by what's accessible, what's nearest to you, what's convenient. All that to be thrown into a period of change and growth that happens in adolescence and young adulthood, in which you're encouraged to sort of formulate your own opinions on quite literally everything, and build your identity sort of from the ground up. And that's something that I still think I'm definitely working on. I'm more secure in it now than I ever have been, but I'm sure I won't say the same in 6 months, a year, 2 years, etc. And in large part, that growth has sort of been kickstarted by questioning, by being a critical thinker, by engaging in active reflection about who I am, what I believe, and why I believe it. I can think of just a few certain topics. For instance, religion, right? I was born into a quite religious family. My family is Roman Catholic. My grandfather worked at a church for 40, 50 years. My dad grew up in a very heavily, wow, that thunder is loud, a house that really valued religion. My mom grew up Protestant, and before she married my father, she converted to Catholicism. And so that meant that me and my siblings grew up in a pretty not rigid Catholic household, but we attended church fairly regularly. I got my communion. I got my confirmation in high school, high school, I think, yeah. And so definitely had a religious influence growing up. Also went to a Catholic university for the first year of college. I didn't go there because it was Catholic. In fact, at that time, I'd already started to sort of question my religious identity. But as I've gotten older, religion is something I grapple with pretty regularly. I don't feel drawn to the church. I don't feel a connection to any spiritual being of any sort. But at the same time, I recognize that I don't really feel like I'm educated enough on it to completely reject it. So at this point in time, I don't really associate with any religion. I'm sort of just, I'm living life, and I'm sure there will be a time in my life where I consider it a little bit more intentionally, and I sort of find my place when it comes to the spiritual world or the religious world. That's not right now. I don't think that's for me right now at this stage in my life, but I'm sure that time will come. And with this realization has come a shift in my identity a bit. I never really identified with the Catholic Church to begin with, but now I definitely don't. And I'm very aware that I don't identify with them. And so all that to say, I'm sort of questioning my own beliefs instead of just accepting those of my parents. And this extends far beyond religion. This can relate to, again, my career, questioning what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, where I see my place in the world, so what professional network or space I see myself pursuing. Also questioning where I want to live, right? I packed my bags and moved 1,400 miles away from home. That definitely came with a lot of thought and questioning and critical thinking about, where do I want to have a family one day? Where do I want to grow up? And that's not to say I'm going to, live in Florida for the rest of my life, but it did mean, hey, you don't want to live in Connecticut for the rest of your life. So at the very least, you got to pack your bags and move now and experience somewhere else. And maybe it is where you decide to settle, maybe it's not, but at least you tried. At least you accepted it. And, I'm very grateful to live here and I love it. And again, I'm not sure that this is a place I see myself living my whole life, but at the very least, I experienced something new from Connecticut and I sort of needed to get out of that bubble. And again, questioning your own beliefs and identity can come in a lot of different forms. But I truly believe that active thinking process is extremely important in building an identity that's really reflective of who you are internally. I think we sort of live in a world that encourages us to project an identity different from what's happening internally, and I really fight back on that. I think you're doing yourself and others a disservice to project a type of identity that's not mirroring what you truly believe and value, and that just seems fake and unproductive to me. And so something I'm working on is really, as stupid as it sounds, like being myself and just ensuring that the way I act in different social situations is truly reflective of who I am and what I value. Being the friend that I want people to be to me and being the employee that I want people, that I would hope people would be to me. And making sure that I project my values and my beliefs with confidence. And I don't hold back because I'm fearful of rejection or I'm fearful of criticism, but sharing those things because I have valuable opinions to offer this world and valuable thoughts that could be insightful and filled with wisdom for other people to hear. But with that, welcoming criticism and intentionally accepting criticism and really thinking about it. This is something that I'm working on. Again, something that I don't think we can just sort of pick up right away, but accepting criticism is extremely difficult. It's not an easy task, but it's so unbelievably important for growth and for identity building and development, and I just think it's incredibly valuable. I really admire people who I feel like can convey constructive criticism in a productive and meaningful way to me and to others. And I think it can be really conducive to creating healthy relationships and building open lines of communication. And so this is something that I'm working on in terms of both giving and receiving. I'm trying to develop new skills and strategies and how to better communicate with others, concerns or inquiries that I may have, but also accepting those from other people and legitimately integrating those criticisms into new practices and new beliefs and new ideas, just to become a more well-informed employee or friend or family member, etc. Again, I think that criticism or feedback in general rather needs to be welcomed. It's not always welcomed, that's for certain, especially in like a workplace. But when it is welcomed, I think that accepting it and being really intentional about how you use that criticism and feedback to shape future actions and behavior can be really, really important. So yeah, that was a long tangent. And I'm beginning to realize I feel like these episodes are just sort of me spurring out things that I believe or feel passionate about, but I guess that's kind of the point. Hopefully with a little bit more structure than just that. But I really wanted to touch on this sort of relationship that I've been recognizing between my own goals and my own fears. I think it's a really interesting perspective to think about how the two might be intertwined. And like I said, there's definitely more goals and fears, so maybe we can do sort of a part 2. But these are just a few that came to mind right away. They're pretty current, and so I thought they might be topical for other people my age. But yeah, I really appreciate you guys coming back. I apologize again for the sort of inconsistency in terms of upload schedule. It's something that I'm working on. I appreciate the constructive criticism and feedback, and always welcome it from you guys, especially. I really value your opinion, but I'm going to try to be more intentional and more structured, and I hope that's appreciated by you guys. So I engaged in a long session of brainstorming today, did some crowdsourcing about future episode topics, and I'm really excited about some of them and passionate. So I hope you come back for more, and I really do hope you're appreciating these episodes and maybe learning something, maybe not, I don't know, but I really hope that you're enjoying this little safe corner of the internet. Yeah, that's all. But thank you guys so much for listening. Again, please come back next week for another episode of Subconscious Medicine, and bye. Love you guys.